You. Good evening from the News Radio, 1120 AM and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I'm Bill Lundun, and I have Crazy Man here. I do the wake-up call 6 a.m. to 9 on KPNW, also streaming at kpnw.com. And tonight's news brought to you by Dr. Michael Bratland, where if you call him today, he'll see you today at his little clinic called Chris Dental. And by the way, now they have this new system to clean your teeth where they use lasers like these. This is alien technology that Dr. Bratland is using. He doesn't screw around. None of this dental floss stuff and that other garbage. No, he goes into outer space and gets the real deal right here. You ought to see his interocitor. And for those of you who are really nerdy, I expect on the comments here you put on there what movie the interocitor was featured in. You know, Rick? All right, here's a look at some of Oregon's, typical news. One of the things that is going on, of course, is we are building up to the May primary for Oregon, which is happening next Tuesday. And so far, Oregon's primary election next week isn't exciting anybody very much. The ballots, which are mail-in Oregon, or you have the option if you want to drop them off to do so, the ballots so far are barely trickling in. Currently, about 213,000 votes have been cast by mail. About 7% of the state's voter rolls so far have turned in their ballots, according to the Oregon State Department election division. And the expectation is, this is really, really low compared to what it normally is. That's not necessarily a good thing because the May elections, at least in Oregon, can have fairly sizable effects, particularly on money issues. And many of those money issues end up local bond measures and the like on the May ballot, and also nonpartisan, but still pretty important races, like, for instance, for mayor, city council, and county commissioner races. Well, it's a first-time full statewide so-called domicile unknown report that was released by the Oregon Health Authority, and it shows what the homeless in Oregon, what they died of, and how they died. Well, here are some of the takeaways. In Oregon, homeless folks died at a rate 37 times higher than the overall statewide overdose rates. Yes, we're talking about overdose. Overdoses, the number one cause of death among Oregon's homeless people. Second is heart disease. But when you lump together in what's called the violent death category, which includes suicide, homicide, and pedestrian crashes, together that makes up the third leading cause of death amongst the homeless population in Oregon. The new data also highlights that the most common place where deaths occur are in public spaces. Hospitals come in far behind in second. And as far as the county with the highest number of homicide fatalities amongst homeless residents, you probably, if you're from Oregon, would guess Multnomah County. That's Portland. So repairs at the library at Portland State University are going to exceed $750,000 following an occupation by pro-Palestinian anti-Israeli demonstrators. The walls were spray painted, chipped away, equipment was damaged, glass was broken out, and the library is going to be closed at least until fall to make the repairs. The estimate, by the way, doesn't include the cost of replacing damaged technology and furniture. Like, for instance, they ripped the fire alarms and the fire alarm technology right out of the walls. That's not even factored into this. 26 people, by the way, were arrested and charged in connection with that occupation. They say that more arrests maybe are going to be possible. And in case you're wondering, yes, the majority of those people that were arrested in the library were not students and did not attend Portland State University. So we've talked about the delays with the Oregon Employment Department's new online system for unemployment benefits. And now a group of Republican lawmakers wrote Oregon Governor Tina Kotek saying that she needs to come up with a plan to remedy the issue. Now, OED, Oregon Employment Department, Francis Online program is this new program that was launched earlier this year that was touted to increase convenience and accuracy for Oregonians and their unemployment claims. And since that program launched in February of this year, it's been anything but convenient or accurate. As a matter of fact, many Oregonians have encountered huge hurdles just trying to get signed up for their unemployment benefits, including issues with the website, which boots them out, extremely long hold times when they call the employment division, longer wait times to actually receive unemployment benefits. And while OED says, well, we're addressing the issues, including hiring more staffers, the volume on the phones and the calls coming in are still high, as are the wait times to get anybody. The Republican lawmakers in the House of Representatives and Senate sent the nasty gram to Governor Tina Kotek saying, you need to lay out a detailed plan of action on how this is going to get handled. The letter says that Francis Online has failed to meet its goals. It's failing to provide funds to Oregonians who need them most. Lawmakers say that going beyond staffing increases, that they need to set things like performance targets and planning strategies to meet the targets. A third of unemployed Oregonians using the new system have had to wait a minimum of 3 weeks just to get their unemployment benefits, while many have waited several months since filing for benefits without getting anything, and many don't even hear back from the Oregon Employment Department. The letter demands that the governor publicly release a detailed plan of action for how OED is going to clear the backlog of unemployment cases, as well as implement a strategy to actually communicate with the claimants, the people that need the money. They also say that OED's failure to provide unemployment benefits during a time of uncertainty damages trust in the government as a whole, like anybody in Oregon has any trust in it anymore to begin with, but still. And they want a plan released on how they're going to get this handled. Now, there have been a number of fairly well publicly documented cases where the Oregon Employment Department's failures have cost people their homes. Not only their homes, but also evicted from their apartments and left them essentially with nowhere to go. Thank you, Oregon. Thank you so much. So it's back. It's the Oregon 2021 Climate Protection Program, which forces fossil fuel companies and companies that hypothetically produce greenhouse gas to cap their emissions every year. And it's back. And it will affect just about everybody in the state financially. Now, this program was not something that was done by the legislature. No, this was done by executive decree, an executive order from former Governor Kate Brown. Thank you, Governor Brown. Last year, the Oregon Court of Appeals actually stalled its implementation, not because of the plan itself being utterly screwy, but because the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality actually didn't provide any notice of the plan to the impacted businesses. In other words, we're going to create this behind closed doors and screw you, here it is. Well, the program is going to force natural gas sectors and fossil fuel or transportation fuel providers and industry to reduce emissions in those sectors by 50% by 2035 and 90% by 2050. It's just like the failed cap and trade scheme that was blocked by Republicans in the Oregon legislature, and it forces companies to buy what they call community climate investment credits. Yeah, it's essentially an investment into the general fund and will be spent however the legislature wants to. Now, that is supposed to reduce their emissions. And if they can't reduce their emissions, they buy these investment credits. That's a nice way of saying cap and trade. And the increased cost of purchasing these investment credits for goals that are created so there's no way that they can meet them will be passed along, of course, to you, the consumer. Most industries in Oregon will be affected either directly or indirectly with higher costs, again, passed along to the consumers. Northwest Natural, as previously stated, they believe the DEQ has worked outside of its authority in moving forward with the program, and they say it lacks accountability. Well, of course, it's Oregon, and it's going to be costly for consumers. Well, of course, it's Oregon, and it's unlikely to reduce any emission reductions that customers will still be paying for. Well, of course, it's Oregon. Duh. So here's a big surprise. Remember what they were calling Bourbongate here in Oregon, where high-ranking members of the OLCC were diverting very rare and very expensive bourbons and whiskeys to, well, themselves and members of the Oregon legislature. And apparently, even potentially, well, statewide elected office holders, hint, hint, as well as people like, for instance, the bosses of the daughters of a couple of the employees of the OLCC, instead of allowing it to go to the public. And it blew up in 2023. And that they had improperly used their positions to, well, get their hands on really expensive and really rare booze. Now, Governor Tina Kotek called for a Justice Department investigation in 2023 after the allegations surfaced that these in-demand bottles, well, weren't being made available to the public like they were supposed to. The Oregon Department of Justice says it will not pursue any charges against OLCC employees. Makes sense. It's Oregon. The investigators claim that they reviewed more than 10,000 OLCC internal documents, reports, and emails, and interviewed more than 40 people. And what they said was, well, we couldn't locate anybody who could identify specific OLCC employees who completed particular purchases. Sales records at one store, they couldn't find those either. Again, these are OLCC-run stores where the transactions were made because they said, well, they're not available. And they couldn't find anything from bank records either. Now, keep in mind this whole idea that, well, we couldn't find anybody that could identify OLCC employees who had completed particular purchases. For God's sakes, their names were reported all over Oregon media, Willamette Week, Oregon Live, the Statesman Journal, and every other small-town newspaper and website all throughout the state of Oregon. And they couldn't find anybody? Where did the names come from? An internal audit of the OLCC. Their names were in the audit. But apparently the Justice Department, they couldn't find them. It was hard. And we couldn't find the records from that liquor store. For folks that don't know, all liquor stores in Oregon are run by the OLCC. The people that supposedly own them don't. The state does. Those supposed owners only have bought a license. They're called an agent. And all of the transactions are, of course, OLCC property. But yet, somehow they weren't able to find these. And 40 people were interviewed, and supposedly they didn't talk. Well, those same people talked to the people that did the internal audit, which is how this all came about to begin with. And they said, well, we couldn't get the information. So after all of this and a year and a half of investigation, now the Oregon Justice Department says, yeah, we just couldn't come up with anything. And they put all of this research in an 18-page report. 18 pages. We just couldn't find anybody. This is the Oregon Department of Justice. They can subpoena people. They can make them go on record and testify. And they say, after a year and a half, the largest law firm, the Oregon Department of Justice in the state, couldn't get anybody to talk, and they couldn't find any emails, and they couldn't find the documentation. Yeah, okay. And by the way, the 18-page document didn't address any of the Oregon legislators or statewide elected leaders who ended up getting their hands on this very special supply of liquor. Because, after all, it's frickin' Oregon. All right, your news has been brought to you by Dr. Michael Bratlin, who uses these to clean your teeth. It's space-age technology at Chris Dental. Go see him. Dr. Michael Bratlin's a pretty cool dude, too. All right, Rick, time for you to roll out the reel.